Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with the patch 14.3 rundown. This is our third patch of the 14th set. Last patch, not one of our better patches. I think especially if you're a competitive player, it really a history lesson in what one bad bug or one bad balance change can do to an entire meta. Unfortunately, there was just a really bad issue with one of the Exotech items in conjunction with some of the minor changes that ended up being a bit too much, that really threw it all out of whack. And that's always been one of the challenging parts about balancing TFT, is that one thing goes wrong and the whole house of cards gets knocked over. That being said, it's been 2 weeks. Time for another patch. Time for us to hopefully improve the meta significantly. And the other big news here is that we actually have one big thing coming out, which is a bunch of new content, which we'll talk about here. And the reality is, each time we launch a set, we don't, like, even though we're doing 3 sets a year and we're not doing mid sets, we don't want it to just kind of be like drop a set, done, buy. And so a lot of our designers get pretty passionate. They're like, oh, but what if we could add some more stuff to it? And so you're getting the benefit of that, some hard work from people like Tem and Kent and Phil coming together to add a bunch more of exciting content to the game that hopefully livens up the set even more. So yeah, that's the stuff I'm really excited for. So let's jump into it and talk about what's coming. All right, first off, so as I mentioned, there are a lot of new hacks. This is page 1 of 2. Let's go over them. First off, we have some new carousel hacks. The first of which is the Tome of Traits carousel. Yes, Tome of Traits is back. Now keep in mind, after 4 days of PBE testing, I haven't seen it. So to give you an idea of how frequent it is, it's about that frequent. You're not going to see it that often. But when it does come back, I need you to note that we're trying a new rule set. This is not the old rules with how Tome of Traits worked. There's like the whole counting traits. That's gone. Now it basically says all those active traits have about a 25% chance of appearing. That's it. Phil did some fancy math. So if you only have 1 trait active, 25% chance of it appearing. If you've got 8 traits active, 25% chance of each one of them appearing. That's it. So that's the whole rule. Tome of Traits, if you see it, that's how it works. The idea is you should just take it, pop it, use it. That's it. So other carousels, 2-star carousel. When this happens, all the units on the carousel are 2-star. Keep in mind, they'll also all be the same cost. I've seen this twice with 2-cost champions. So everyone will get the same cost champion at least. It's not like somebody gets a 5-cost and you get a 1-cost or anything like that. One of my favorites, too many units carousel. This one's hilarious. There's just like 15 units on the carousel. It looks big and hilarious. So yeah, that one's fun. There's also an all 3-cost carousel and an all 4-cost carousel. Those obviously appear later in the game. Just changes the units. We did remove any spat and pan carousels. We didn't need that and Tome of Traits. That's gone. So those are all the new carousel hacks. And then another new hack that happens, I've seen this 3 times on PBE so far. This one's really fun, but you'll complete your PBE. Let's say you're fighting Krugs and you beat Krugs. All of a sudden it'll go, da-da, deja vu, the hack broke, and you have another round of Krugs. So it will double your PvE rounds, and there will be a stage 2-8 or stage 4-8. It's really funny. It's just extra loot, but it's really done in a fun thematic way. I like that one. That one's really cool. In addition, we have a bunch of new hacked orbs, complete with new consumables. So these are some new toys for you to play with. First off is the Bag of Gold. When you get this, it'll say use on a champ to gain 4 gold, but that increases 1 every turn. So the longer you hold your Bag of Gold, the more gold you can get. I've gotten it up to like 20, 21 gold if you save it for a long time. Use it when you want. It's up to you. Salvager. This is one, interestingly enough, I didn't see in my entire testing, but it is there. You can use it on a champ and it will remove their items like an item remover, but also break them down into components. This is one that I think a lot of people have been asking for a long time. So try it out. Break apart items. Pretty cool. There's also Implant Size, which you can use on a champ to permanently give 350 HP and 20% size. Before you ask, no, the size doesn't do anything. It's just cosmetic. But you can give somebody 350 permanent HP. Cool. Then Implant Speed. I like this one. Zeri fans, I'm sure, will love this one. But use on a champ to give them 20% attack speed and shrink. So you can have a little tiny Zeri dashing around. It's pretty cute. Other hacked orbs that can appear. Starter kits. This can appear only on stage 1. And it will, when you open the hacked orb, you will get a 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost with a shared trait. So, for example, you might get Jax plus Alawi plus Galio. There's your Bastion starter kit. So everyone gets a starter kit. Now, Cypher is not excluded for obvious reasons. I don't think we need somebody opening a hacked orb and just getting 3 Cypher for free. That's probably not okay. But every other trait is allowed. So there you go. And then nesting dolls. I like this one. When you open up the hacked orb, out will come a single silver orb. You open up the silver orb, out will come a single blue orb, as well as the loot inside of it. And then you open the blue one, and out will come a gold orb and the loot inside of it. So it's just a bunch of fun loot that everyone gets. Pretty cool. So those are all the hacked orbs. And then there are some new opening encounters. And all of these are actually pretty cool. To split or not to split. Basically, you know the gold split event that randomly happens in the game? If you get this opening encounter, it will happen after every single carousel. So you just know that after every single carousel, they'll be split. The values will change, so you don't know what values you're getting, but there will generally be a little bit more gold in that game. Group investing. This one's interesting. It's very similar, but different. After every carousel, there is a 40 gold pot. And so on 2-5, everyone will vote to split that, where everyone gets 5 gold, or raise it by another 40 for the next time. And so if everyone continues to push it, then after 3-5, it's an 80 gold pot. After 4-5, it's a 120 gold pot. And if you go all the way to 5-5, it's a 160 gold pot. And if you're crazy enough and somehow make it to 6-5, the 2 people left alive can split a 200 gold pot. So gets pretty silly. But hilariously enough, if you keep pushing it, it's actually like a no encounter game. So kind of interesting. Yeah. Reroll subscription. This is just like gold subscription, except instead of gold, you get rerolls. Cool. And then finally, 3 champions. I didn't see this one on my PBE testing, but 3 champions. Everyone in the game starts with a 2-star 2-cost champion, and we made sure everyone gets a unique one. So you can do what you want with it, but everyone gets a 2-star 2-cost champion. And there you go. There's all the new hacks. So lots of new content to play around with there. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to those. Those will be fun. On to the balance changes. All right, first off, AMP. AMP has not really had much success. The little success it did have was off the back of like Strategist and Kobuko being too strong. Now that those are dealt with, AMP isn't really playable because you have to play a Nidalee and a Nefiri and somehow still make it to get Samira, which is pretty tough to do. So if you make it, you should be rewarded for it. So the health is going to go up from 350, 500 at 4 and 5 to 400, 600. That's a little bit more bonus health. But the big swing here is that at 5 amp, if you're willing to play 5 amp, you'll get an extra power charge. Now what that means is like whatever part of your spell is getting an extra boost of increase. So that means Nefiri's throwing more dogs, Nidalee's doing more chain lightning, etc. So hopefully 5 amp will have a lot more offensive power. I don't know that this is going to make it like S tier or anything. It's still going to be pretty hard to play. But if you get it, it should be rewarding, and hopefully that helps it. All right, Cypher. Cypher is getting a couple minor changes. This isn't going to really change it too much. First off, if you want to keep 5 Cypher in, it'll actually be a little bit more worth it. You'll get, instead of 55 AD and AP, you'll get 65, which feels a little bit more worth. Right now, basically everyone's keeping in 3 Cypher or just ditching it completely. We do want 5 Cypher to be an option, so there's a little power. That being said, that does mean you still have to have like a Vi and a LeBlanc in your comp, so it might not be enough, but it's a step. And then the other change here is that right now, a lot of Cypher's power is a little bit heavily indexed on stage 2. And we did kind of want this to be a little bit like Heartsteel, where like you could pivot into it in stage 3 or even stage 4. And so what we're doing is slightly nerfing the amount of intel in stage 2. Stage 3 is the same. And then stage 4 and stage 5 is getting buffed. So if you're willing to play Cypher in the late game with 5 Cypher, you'll get a little bit more intel. Nothing crazy here. And then finally, Hyper Roll. For those of you that play Hyper Roll, Cypher was really, really bad, so it's just getting a big buff. So Cypher better in Hyper Roll. Cool. Next up, Dynamo. Dynamo is a good trait. We're pretty happy with Dynamo. We don't need to go crazy here, but 2 Dynamo is just a little too much free utility for a team, especially for things like, a Jhin carry or, an Aurora just playing 2 Dynamo. So 2 Dynamo is getting a 1 mana reduction. Pretty small. Nothing crazy. All right, Golden Ox. Golden Ox is not an S tier comp by any means, but it is certainly the highest ceiling comp in the game. And we're buffing a lot of the Golden Ox champions. We can't really buff all the Golden Ox champions and leave the trait where it is. So we're nerfing 6's damage cap to lower its cap a bit. That's it. So hopefully it's still playable. And again, the champions are getting buffed, so it's meant to be power neutral. Now, from what I've tested, this damage number might have needed to be like 26 or 27. So we'll see. If it is, we'll change it. But again, we couldn't leave it the same with all the champion buffs you'll see later. Street Demon. Street Demon 3 and 5, great place. A lot of weird versions. 7, not very good. So we are buffing 7 a bit. So 7 is getting that extra 2 AD, AP, HP. So 7 Street Demon should be a bit better. And then 10 is coming down a bit. 10's overperforming a little bit, not a lot by any means. This is one of those like, it's 1.3 instead of 1.4, you know, so really tiny nerf to 10 Street Demon. Okay, Anima Squad. For those of you that see green sentences and get scared, this is a green sentence. Anima Squad is going to be a bit better because first off, we fixed a bug with it, or bad design, whatever you want to call it. But the way Anima Squad worked is, let's say you have a weapon damage of 100 that was scaling by the star level of all your champions on your team. So you had enough star levels to make it 200. The problem was that's supposed to be the way it works, but as they die, that number was going down. It was the current alive Anima Squad units. So as your team started dying, your Anima Squad weapons got weaker and weaker and weaker, which is silly and not very fun. So now, whatever your star level was at the start of combat, that's the weapon power. So cool, that's better. That's a buff. Then in addition, we've rebalanced the scaling of the weapons very slightly by the way they're affected by stage and star level. And so basically, the long story short of this, there's a bunch of really fine levers we can tune. I can't go into all of them. But the short version is if you have an all 1-star Anima Squad comp, it's nerfed. You're going to be weaker. But if you have an all 2-star comp, it's a buff. It'll do more damage. So Anima Squad's cap should be higher, but just throwing in 5 1-star Anima Squad should be weaker is the goal. And so overall, Anima Squad should be closer to playable. The last PBE game I literally played on stream, Anima Squad was doing quite well. So we'll see. But hopefully Anima Squad gets back to some of its former glory. All right. Then we have Exotech. Obviously, Exotech, big story of this patch because you could play Exotech Zeri or Vexotech. A lot of Exotech. So let's go backwards here. The first thing is obviously we had to fix the hollow bow issue. Now the issue was especially on Zeri. Zeri could trigger the effect multiple times, and because you're already at max crit, you could get 240, 300% critical strike damage, and your Zeri was pumping out insane amounts of damage. That was not intended. The buff was supposed to be you either have it or you don't. That's it. So you can only have one instances of the buff. This is a massive nerf to Hollow Bow Zeri specifically. Most of the other champions weren't proccing it more than once in the 5 seconds it was active. Really only Zeri could do that. Now, hypothetically, if you have 2 Hollow Bows, which is possible with that one augment, you can have 2 copies of the buff, but that's a pretty rare case. Now, just to make sure that we didn't end up in the same world, we want this item to be good on Varus, not Zeri. So we also pulled back on the crit. These numbers are backwards. It should say 60 to 40, but it's going to be 60 to 40. So it's getting nerfed back that. And we put more back in the AP. So the item, again, is meant to be about neutral on a champion like Varus, but a massive, massive nerf to Zeri. Zeri does not need to be running around with Hollow Bow doing these terrible things. In addition, Flux Capacitor. Flux Capacitor was really strong the first patch. It hasn't been as strong this patch. But one of the problems with this item is it kind of hard counters any high HP strategy. Did you want to play Cho'Gath? Oh, I'm sorry. Zeri was taking 15% of your health every 4 autos. That's not very good. So we are drastically nerfing Flux Capacitor's percent HP damage. Goes down to 8%. Still decent against something like a Cho'Gath. But compensating it with some attack speed and some AD. It is supposed to be a good item on Zeri. If it's Zeri's best item, that's a good thing, but should open up some other strategies. And then finally, Cyber Coil. Hilariously enough, when we made the patch, so if this has changed, this is one of those things about locking patches, 10 days before they ship. But Cyber Coil was the one bad Exotech item. We've buffed it up by giving up 10 more armor and Omar. Now, that being said, I know Sejuani has gained a lot of steam, and so it's decent on Sejuani, and so Sejuani's will still be good with this, but that's kind of intended. But again, Hollow Bow nerf being the big one here. All right. On the champion side, a lot of green. Most of the champions, you're going to see mostly buffs with a few nerfs in some areas. But let's talk about them. First up, Alistar getting a big buff here. Alistar is okay in the early game, but he's just not very exciting. No one's running around with Alistar 3s having any fun whatsoever. So let's change that. More flat damage reduction. 12, 18, 25 becomes 15, 20, 30. And the damage he does with his spell is being buffed by 20%. 25% at 3-star. You'll notice this is not normal scaling. He goes from 240, 360 to 600. This cow can hit hard. From my testing on PBE, it's a very, very fun comp now. Alistar can do some good work if you hit it early. Build-a-Bud Alistar, I think, will be very, very good. It does fall off. I'm not saying we're going to see Alistar's S tier, but hopefully you have some fun with Alistar now. Dr. Mundo, similar story, actually. And yes, there are a lot of bruiser buffs in this patch, so watch out for that. Dr. Mundo, similar story. In our testing when we were playing him, we were watching him, have 10,000 health and crit people for 2,000. That just hasn't played out, unfortunately. So we're giving him some pretty big buffs here. He's going to heal more when he casts. His spell will scale off AD a lot more. And this means if you're playing him in like a 6 Slayer, he's actually going to hit a lot harder. And then also his spell is going to scale with his HP even more. So if he's got like double Warmogs, he's going to hit like a truck. These are big buffs. This is kind of what we wanted when we first designed Mundo. So hopefully this gets him to that for more glory. So Mundo 3s should be scary, hopefully. Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw small buff. This isn't anything crazy. I don't think this is going to make Kog'Maw's very meta or anything like that. But Kog'Maw deserves to do some damage when you 2-star him and put an item on him. So Kog'Maw will do a little bit more damage. Cool. Morgana. This is probably one of the spicier changes here. If you just look at this number, you're like, this goes from 220 damage to 400 damage. That's almost double. That's insane. Well, not quite, but also kind of. The spell duration is going from 10 seconds to 16 seconds, which means when she dots somebody, it's going to last a long time. And if you can draw out the fight, she's going to have incredibly high uptime. Now, as far as the actual buff goes, if you look at the DPS here, it's only going from like 22 to 25, which is about a 12% buff, which is a sizable buff, but nothing insane. But the fact that it lasts a lot longer gives you some options to play like a Gunblade Morgana. From what we've seen on PBE, she's pretty damn strong. So expect to see some, hopefully some Morganas be playable. It does fall off in the late game, which again, one cost falling off, like good. But hopefully Morganas are actually exciting to get on 2-1. And hopefully this makes Morgana cool. And speaking of which, the last one cost here that really needs a little bit of love is Zyra. Zyra just doesn't quite have the same chunky hit that she did in the last set. So she's getting some of that damage back. So about a 10% buff here, a little more to her spell damage and her secondary damage. From what I've seen, something like a Mana Zane Zyra early can actually just like delete teams now. So hopefully Zyra feels a little bit more like an actual playable one-cost carry. And so again, hopefully this opens up more early game lines. On the small side, Poppy gets the world's smallest buff. Poppy is going to get 5 more mana. This helps the hero augment. This helps Cyber Boss early. If you get like a Build-A-Bud Poppy, it's not going to be garbage now. So small buff, nothing crazy. And then Shaco. We took Hyper Roll off the tooltip if you're not in Hyper Roll. This drastically changes the meta. Shaco will now be S tier and D tier. It's a big shakeup. There you go. All right, 2 costs. If you believe some of the hyperbolic players that it's a reroll meta, and so we're going to take some of the 2 costs that are really succeeding and give them a tiny bump down in most cases. So first off is Jhin. Very small nerf here. He's going to have to auto 1 more time to get his first spell cast, only his first one. It doesn't change his max mana. And the little bounces will do a little bit less. Not the big bounce. The big bounce will still hit really hard. Again, very tiny nerf here to Jhin. Vayne, similar story. Vayne is going to need 2 more autos to get her first cast, and she's going to get repeat casts a little less often by 10 mana. It's a 10 mana nerf. This will slow down how quickly that Vayne accelerates with her Ginsu's. She still will be a Ginsu's insane, nightmare. It'll just slow that down a little so that Vayne's not quite as capped as she was before. Vhagar gets the world's lightest touch here. This is just a very minor bump. Some of this is to compensate for things like having his surrounding units get buffed. Some of this is just because of that jeweled gauntlet fix. He ended up being a little bit better. But overall, very tiny nerf for Vhagar here. So again, Jhin, Vayne, Vhagar, very tiny nerfs. Nothing major. Twisted Fate. This is one of the bigger ones, and this one's a little complicated. If you've played a lot of Twisted Fate, you know his bestest slot is Ginsu's plus Gunblade usually. And the reason for that is because he was gaining so much AP per auto. So for example, if he had autoed 40 times in a fight, which is pretty common, upwards he can get 50 and even 60, but 40 times in a fight, that's 80 AP, which was making his spell do 80% more damage. That's pretty insane. And so because of that, you basically had to build Ginsu's. It was like where all his true power lies. We want to fix that a bit. So the amount of AP you're getting from Ginsu, like from your autos, is going to go down by a lot, 25% here, down to 1.5. So you're going to get less. His cap is going to be lower. That being said, like his first cast and his second cast will hit harder. We've buffed the base damage by 10%. Special card a little less than that, but basically what you can expect is if you build exactly Ginsu's Gunblade, this is a nerf because once you pass about 30 or 40 autos, your spell's doing less damage than it was before. You won't be able to close out fights quite as hard. But in the early game, let's say you're stuck with like a Shojin and a Ginsu's or slightly less ideal items, those first 2 casts can actually hit a lot harder. And so hopefully this makes TF a little more flexible with his items, a little bit better of an item carrier as opposed to just like only exactly those items. But again, if you're literally looking at the Twisted Fate comp right now, it's a nerf. It's a nerf to that comp. So, and then finally, he was the last piece of 7 Syndicate we wanted to nerf. The problem with 7 Syndicate TF was he was throwing 3 cards, which basically meant 7 Syndicate was triple the damage on TF. That's too much of a buff. Double's already pretty insane. But now he only throws a red and a blue card. You lose the gold card. So it's even the lowest part, but it is a nerf. So he's still insane with 7 Syndicate. Shocker. All right. That's the 2 costs. Back to the land of buffs, mostly. Braum. Braum is getting buffed in a silly way. This isn't actually a Braum is tankier buff. But if you want to run like 3 or 5 Syndicate Braum and put a bunch of tank items on him, when he has the hat on, he does bonus damage based on his armor. Well, we're doubling that based on the amount of armor you have. So if you want to go Braum 3 with like Bramble and Gargoyle, it'll hit harder. We want you to try that. I don't think it'll be S tier, but let's see what this does. So that's it. Gragas, another Bruiser buff and a Divinicorp buff, but Gragas just not quite as tanky as other options like Mordekaiser. He'll be able to cast a bit more. This is also a buff to Chugbug, so cool. Jarvan. Jarvan was definitely one of the biggest mistakes of the last patch. We overswung this. We don't want Jarvans running around with, IE and frickin' hysterics deleting everything. That being said, it did make Jarvan more fun. And so we're not going to like completely revert it and make him back to, because in the first patch, he was basically a trait bot. And at least this patch, we're having fun with him. So we're just lowering that damage slightly. He still has that same high base AD. He still has that same shield value. We don't want to nerf Gold Nox too hard here, but Jarvan will hit a little less hard. That's it. Rengar. Rengar's pretty close, and this is mostly, if anything, to compensate for the 7 Street Demon change more than anything. But Rengar is still just a tiny bit tanky. I know he's not like turbo meta right now, and if anything, he's falling off, which is why it was a very light change, but he's just losing 50 base HP, so he won't be quite as survivable. That's it. Yuumi. Yuumi got over-nerfed on PBE. Let's just not beat around the bush. A lot of people were like, it is incorrect to upgrade your Yuumi at all. We need to fix that. So we're swinging a little hard here. I wouldn't call this mega hard here. If you look at the spell damage buff, it's only a 5% buff. Nothing crazy here. But the mark damage is going up from 175 to 190. So this means Yuumi hopefully will start dealing some big damage if you have like a blue buff, get some amp out. Probably, again, I don't know that this is going to make Yuumi S tier or anything like that, but hopefully now hitting a Yuumi too early is actually a good thing. We'll see. If we need to go more, we will. All right, 4 costs. 4 costs is where we're trying to put more of our buffs here. We want to make sure, you know, it's not just a reroll meta. There are more things playable here, and that starts with 2 really big changes. The first one is Xayah. Xayah is just getting 5 more AD. Xayah is kind of the pinnacle of like the Marksman Vanguard comp, the Anima Squad comp, and if she's not playable, that's not a good thing. So Xayah gets more AD. Great. Aphelios. This one's a little complicated. This is a buff. Let's be very clear. This is a very large buff, but it's not as big a buff as it might look like. Now, the reason for that is if you've played current Aphelios, what you'll notice is that most of his power is actually in his spell cast. He shoots that big old thing that hits, and that thing hits really hard. It can like delete backlines. And then he's stuck autoing with like these tiny little chakrams that tickle that basically do nothing. And so you're basically like, hurry up and get those crappy chakrams out so I can get back to the next spell cast. It's often why 3-star Aphelios loses, because 3-star Aphelios shoots his big bolt, doesn't kill the right target, and then is stuck doing the crappy little autos. So here's what's happening. He's going to do his first cast a little quicker, but then he's going to have to do more chakrams, so it's going to take longer to get to his second cast. That's the nerf here. That is a little bit of a nerf. But the chakrams aren't going to tickle anymore. The chakrams are actually going to hit really hard. So if you look at it before, it was like 6 autos with no chakram, 6 autos with chakrams, repeat. Now it's 5 with no, 8 with yes. That's 1 more auto per big cast, but those 8 with yes hit much harder. And so actually getting the chakrams will feel good. And when he's in that state, he's going to hit like a truck. This is almost doubling their damage. So, again, buff to Aphelios is the TLDR here. Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is the next one. Cho'Gath, unfortunately, even in 6 Bruiser, is like, meh. He's just not really living up to Cho'Gath. Now, Cho'Gath, if people often ask me, what's the hardest champ to balance? It's going to be Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is absolutely, with this design, going to be the hardest champion to balance. He is on a knife's edge where if he is able to cast 3 or 4 or 5 times, the dude goes infinite. He can't die. He's going to be difficult to deal with. If he dies before his like second cast, he looks like a joke and he's a terrible champion. He's going to be able to cast sooner. He's got less mana, and he'll scale with AP a little bit better. From what I've tested, he seems decent. But I'm playing PvE lobbies. We'll see. If this overbuffs him, we'll see. We'll see what that does to the meta. If it underbuffs him, okay, we can deal with that. But Cho'Gath will be better. Definitely consider trying him. Should help a lot of lines. Should help the Bruiser line. Should help the Boombot line. Should be good. And then finally, Vex. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at this going, what are you doing? Why are you buffing Vex? This is insane. The logic behind this here is that Exotech did get some pretty chunky nerfs. And this is only her overhealing conversion, which means you have to be running something like a Gunblade. And it is a very small buff to only that true damage percent. And the reality is we're not seeing a lot of Divinicorp Vex. It's like, that's not a thing. It's like someone found one Exotech line, and that's all that's really being played. But we want to try to promote things like Divinicorp Vex. She does need a little bit more oomph. This is going to be a buff that's happening. And yes, we'll see. If Vex ends up being S tier, we can all, tease Mort later. But I do feel pretty comfortable with this. It should be fine. And in addition, the other thing is we needed her to contest things like the buffed Xayah, the buff Aphelios. We need all the 4 costs to be equal. And for that to be true, this did have to happen. So we'll see how it plays out. But yes, it's happening. And yes, I think it'll be fine. All right, a couple small ones here. Very, very small here. The brand nerf, barely a nerf. This is like 2%. And it is literally just to compensate for the 7 Street Demon change. That's it. Brand should feel about the same. You'll barely notice this. Honestly, we probably should have just deleted the patch note because it was so small, but it's a tiny change. And then Annie. This one is to help Annie in the amp comp. Now that we took all that power out of Tibbers, we can put it back in Annie a little bit more. And so if you're playing like 4 or 5 amp, those extra little fireballs will have a lot more kick to them. This is, again, about like 12% buff to those little fireballs. So hopefully if you have amp Annie, it will feel better. Cool. All right, 5 costs. First off, on the nerf side, Aurora and Viego have been kind of the dominant 2 5 costs for 2 patches. Time to pull them down a little bit. So Aurora 2 gets a big nerf here, nerfing her base damage by like 25%, though most of her damage is in the split, but even that's getting nerfed by like 20%. So this is a very, very large nerf to Aurora. Aurora is not going to be the like necessarily best cap to every endgame board. Now, 1-star Aurora got off pretty lightly. So because 1-star Aurora wasn't really winning games by herself, but man, 2-star got out of control. So 2-star Aurora, pretty chunky nerf here. From what we've seen, she seems more balanced on PBE. So, and then Viego. Viego's the other one that usually caps boards. He just does a lot of damage. He heals up pretty immensely. And he has that extra golem, which can provide a ton of other value as well. So we're nerfing his soul heal. That's the healing he gets when someone dies. He just gets like passive healing. That's getting nerfed pretty substantially. And his spell damage is being nerfed by 10%. Now, from what I've tested here, he's still really freaking good. I still expect Viego to be one of the best 5 costs. This one, I don't expect to move the needle quite as much as players might have liked. So keep an eye out for Viego. He's still quite good. On the other side of the coin, we have the buffs. Samira kind of, obviously got over nerfed from that B patch. We're giving her some more AD back, trying to get her up. Obviously, we can't go too hard, but hopefully a 5 amp Samira is scary, or even just like a 2 or 3 amp. Again, from what I've tested, it seems like Strategist might be a little bit back on the menu, but Samira should feel better. And then Urgot. Urgot's always felt a little bit below the other 5 costs. He's exciting because he generates all the items and stuff like that, but he doesn't have the same chunky hits that a lot of the other ones do, which really sucks for comps like Boombots. So we're fixing that. He's going to be able to cast more often. He's going to have about 5% more AD. And when he's casting, that'll deal about 5% more damage. Nothing amazing. It's not like huge buffs, but like Urgot wasn't way under or anything. So he's being buffed. Urgot will be better. That's a good thing. Sweet. All right. And then we have a big, big change here. Kobuko is getting his spell completely reworked, essentially. First off, his attack speed is going from 0.8 to 1.0. So this dude's going to be slapping fast. He's going to be doing his thing. But now he has no mana. He has no mana bar. There is no mana on this champion, okay? He just has a passive that says he deals bonus AP damage on hit. And if you have Cyberboss active, this is a big change. Instead of his ult getting bigger, his passive gets bigger. So if you have 2 Cyberboss and he's the Cyberboss, when he slaps, it'll be a 1-hex AoE that'll do some bonus damage. So he doesn't need Cyberboss quite as much as he did before because, and we'll get to it a little bit later, once he hits half health, he triggers phase 2. In phase 2, and then he's in rage for the rest of the fight where he gains double attack speed, 30% Omnivamp, and his passive goes up in damage by 33%. So phase 2 is like, the boss is in hard mode. It's hard. Now, when he first enters phase 2, he gains that shield he's always gained. It's a bigger shield, actually, but he's not that tanky, so it helps him. Then he casts his ult. Now, his ult is always 2-hex AoE. So throwing a Kobuko on your board now is always 1 2-hex AoE CC. So he's a lot more flex now, which is kind of cool. You can play him in just any bruiser line. You don't need Cyberboss to get that really good utility. That's cool. The spell, though, does not scale with enemy HP anymore. So no more like grabbing someone's Dumbify and hitting the enemy team for 3,000. That's not a thing anymore. It's just AP damage. Now, all of this is to say that he is intended to be like an AP bruiser, where you want AP on him, a little survivability, and he's attacking so fast in phase 2 and healing up from that Omnivamp that he can do some good damage. He's also you get that 1 ult that's really valuable, makes him more flex. should be really good. I don't, from what I've tested, I don't think he's going to be like the main carry in many comps, but he'll be a great secondary carry, which is kind of what 5 costs are supposed to be. But give him a try. And like I said, hopefully this is an improvement. We don't need Kobuko's casting like 3 ults in one fight. And hopefully there's some cool moments where he's running around slapping people in the back. But yeah, give him a try. Should be a lot better. All right. That's it for champions. On to augments. Poppy Hero Augment. Oh, by the way, so augments, we did a pass, and for the most part, you're going to see a lot of nerfs. Augments, this time, we basically were like, okay, there's a lot of importance coming from augments, and there's a few too many augments that are like too key or too swingy. So a lot of augments just kind of got the like tap down. And so you're going to see a lot of red in the next section. We went with buff champs and traits, nerf augments. Couple exceptions here. Poppy Hero Augment, still weak, 10% buff, bigger splash. From what I've seen, it's a little bit better and still not going to be like, it'll be like B tier. So Eye for an Eye and Eye for an Eye Plus were giving too many components for a silver. Those get nerfed. Glass Cannon 1 was way too good compared to Glass Cannon 2 and just too good in general. So it gets nerfed. Rig Shop, way too good for enabling 3 cost comps. It still will. It just didn't need 9 re-rolls on top of it. So it gets nerfed down to 5. Rig Shop, a little worse. On the gold side, Chugbug. Another buff to Chugbug. This is the other hero augment that's still really underperforming. Remember, Gragas got buffed. A lot of Bruisers got buffed. And Chugbug got buffed. So hopefully this helps. But yeah. Crown's Will, just a little too good for a generic augment. 2 less armor. Cut Purse no longer appears on 2-1. Getting a Rengar and a Graves on 2-1 just ended up being too good. Cyber Deck. I told you before this was the most overpowered augment we'd ever shipped, or at least in a long time. Even at 2 items, it was still a really, really, really good augment. Giving 2... Again, if you compare it to BRB, you get 2 full items. This was 2 better than full items. That's too much. So now it's just 1. So it's getting nerfed. Glass Cannon 2, not good enough compared to Glass Cannon 1, so it gets a small buff. High Score, this is one that really enables Cyber Boss a little too easily, to be frank. So a lot of the later breakpoints, it's basically every breakpoint after the 3rd, is now harder to hit. It'll take longer to activate. This is a nerf to High Score, so that augment's going to be worse. Item Collector 2, bit too strong, so less AD and AP. Reinforcing Skeleture, this is the Bruiser one where they die, they gain health. Just really not good enough compared to like Cooking Pot, so it's going to get even more health. Cool. Sated Spellweaver, this one in particular, especially as people figured out how good it was with Vex, this got nerfed. And so if anything, this is the secret Vex nerf that really lowers her extreme caps. But we're lowering the Omnivamp you get from Sated Spellweaver. We're raising the shield to sort of compensate, but that much Omnivamp was a little too much, so that's getting nerfed. Spear's Will, less starting mana. Again, generically too good. Spirit Link now only works on champions. If you've ever had to face a Golemify or Dumbinify Spirit Link, I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Ouch. Trait Tracker. Trait Tracker, this set, now that people have created a bunch of guides and have figured it out, we like this augment when it's sitting at like a 40% top 4 rate and like a 19% win rate. It's like high risk, but it can cap out well. It was above those numbers. And so we are bringing it down. Trait Tracker is going to lose one of its emblems. If we have to go down to 4, we will. I doubt we'd go lower than 4. If it ever has to go lower than 4, we should probably just disable the augment. But 5 should hopefully bring it down, as well as some of the Exotech nerfs, which is one of the better users of that. Speaking of which, Trial Run, that Golem now just doesn't have bonus HP and AD, so that's also being nerfed. And then finally, Vampiric Vitality, the amount you were healing from this, the player health-wise, is being nerfed. This augment's been secret strong for a while, especially in a Cypher comp, so yeah. On the Prismatic side, Coronation, a little too strong, less attack speed and AP. Cool. Cybernetic Uplink 3, a little too strong, less HP, less mana. Endless Hordes and Endless Hordes Plus. This augment stinks. It's quite bad. Big buff to Endless Hordes to get you to try it. The HP reduction will only be 12% now, so you get 3 more units at the cost of 12% of your army's health. Should be interesting. Future Sight. This augment is really, really good. Now the dummies no longer scale as the game goes on. You don't really need a 2,000 health target dummy that has Zephyr and Shroud. That's a bit too much. Hall of Mirrors. The creator of this augment really tried to cook something fun, but every time we ship this augment, there's just so many bugs. There are so many. I think I've seen 3 different bugs with this augment, and unfortunately we can't really spend that time fixing all those bugs for this one augment, so it is being disabled. I'm sorry. Goodbye, Hall of Mirrors. Lucky Gloves. This is one that's actually been overperforming for a while. So both Lucky Gloves and Lucky Gloves Plus now, instead of 3 gloves, you're only going to get 2. Pretty chunky nerf to Lucky Gloves. And finally, subscription service. You're going to get a little bit more gold per stage. So subscription service, a little more fun. And then finally, that gives us to the bug fixes. Fixed a bug for Golden Ox's prop, next bonus percentage being incorrect for certain breakpoints, leading to inconsistent tooltips. It's just a tooltip change, not a functional change. Fixed a bug on Scapegoat Augment tooltip, incorrectly saying it'll grant 1 gold when it actually grants 4. So you get a little, you always got the gold, it's just a tooltip fix. Hollow Bow tooltip reworded to better indicate that the bonuses are applied the moment the champion begins casting. Just a wording change. Bulky Buddies will no longer update in combat if a unit is summoned during combat, like from Aurora. So it was possible for Aurora to mess up your Bulky Buddies. That's fixed. Fixed a bug with Thorn-Plated Armor Augment that wasn't scaling properly for Stage 5+. This is a buff to the Augment, essentially, after Stage 5. Fixed a bug where emblems could show up on Stage 5+ Carousel when they shouldn't, so there will be less emblems on Stage 5+. Cool. Bruiser Circlet now correctly grants a Giant's Belt. Fixed. Fixed a bug where Twisted Fate would not throw enough cards if there were less targets than expected. This is a buff to TF when there's only 1 target left, usually. Anger Issues no longer transforms Radiant Exotech items. Congratulations to the player who hit 10 Exotech with Anger Issues. Brink of Dawn now properly... Okay, this is a really interesting one. I want to call this one out. Brink of Dawn, the Radiant Edge of Night, now properly heals the holder. It wasn't healing before. This item got just a big buff because of this bug fix. So watch out for Radiant Edge of Night. Fixed an issue where Misfortune would aim at questionable places during the start of her ability. Shout out to Giovanni. He went in, rescripted this ability, so hopefully no more Misfortune randomly shooting 2 or 3 waves in the wrong direction. And then finally, Executioner Circlet has been re-enabled and now grants a Vex, because there was an issue where it was granting Zed, not Vex, which was silly, so we disabled it. Now it's back. So, cool. There you go. All right. So that's all the changes. Quite a bit. This is definitely a bigger patch with all the new hacks, with all the champion buffs, all the bruiser buffs, the hollow bow change, things like that. We will keep a close eye on this meta. Normally, this is like when we would say, like, okay, cool, this is our last big change, and then we're going to kind of leave it and do balance change from here on out. That's not the case. There is one more bigger patch coming later. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, enjoy this patch. And worst case, I mean, if it goes rough, we'll obviously change it. Worst case scenario, if a patch is bad, you have to wait 2 weeks. Best case scenario, it's sooner than that when we B-patch. And even worst case scenario, if you're just like, man, this set's not gelling for me, well, the patch after this one, Remix Rumble is getting brought back. So you'll be able to play that as well. So, yeah, there you go. All right, I think that's it for me. There you go. That's your patch rundown. Cool. Hopefully you guys enjoy this patch even more than the last. And yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.